The invisible hand of the market. You've heard this phrase 1,000 times. Free markets regulate themselves. Self-interest leads to social good. Government should stay out of the economy. Every libertarian quotes it. Every economics textbook mentions it. It's the foundation of modern capitalism. But here's the problem. Adam Smith barely mentioned it. The phrase invisible hand appears exactly 3 times in all of Smith's writings. 3 times. In hundreds of thousands of words. 3 mentions. And what's worse, it doesn't mean what everyone thinks it means. The most famous phrase in economics has been completely misunderstood, deliberately twisted, used to justify the exact opposite of what Smith actually believed. This is the story of how one metaphor was weaponized, how the father of capitalism was turned into a prophet of greed, and how the biggest lie in economics became the foundation of modern economic policy. Stay with me, because what Adam Smith actually said will shock you. And what we've done with his ideas is even worse. Adam Smith publishes The Wealth of Nations. It's massive. Over 1,000 pages, dense, complex, covering everything from labor theory to international trade. And buried somewhere in the middle, he uses a phrase that will become more famous than anything else he wrote. The invisible hand. Here's the full quote. By preferring the support of domestic to that of foreign industry, he intends only his own security. And by directing that industry in such a manner as its produce may be of the greatest value, he intends only his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. Read that again, carefully. Smith is talking about a merchant who prefers domestic investment over foreign investment. Not because he's patriotic, because it's safer. He can see what's happening at home. Foreign investment is risky, so this merchant invests locally, pursuing only his own profit. But in doing so, he accidentally benefits his country's economy. That's the invisible hand. A merchant accidentally doing something good while trying to make money. It's a minor observation, a footnote. Smith doesn't build his entire theory around it. He mentions it once in this context and moves on. But here's what modern economics claims Smith meant. Free markets automatically create optimal outcomes. Self-interest always leads to public good. Therefore, government should never interfere. This is not what Smith said. Not even close. Let me show you what Smith actually believed. First, Smith was not a free market fundamentalist. He advocated heavy regulation in dozens of areas. He wanted government to provide public education, build infrastructure, enforce labor standards, break up monopolies, regulate banking, tax the rich progressively. In The Wealth of Nations, Smith writes, civil government, so far as it is instituted for the security of property, is in reality instituted for the defense of the rich against the poor. Does this sound like a libertarian hero? He's saying government exists to protect wealthy people's property from everyone else. He continues, no society can surely be flourishing and happy, of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable. Smith is advocating for workers, for the poor, against excessive wealth concentration. Here's another quote. The interest of dealers is always in some respects different from, and even opposite to, that of the public. Smith is saying businessmen's interests conflict with public interest. He's warning about trusting merchants. And here's the most damning quote. People of the same trade seldom meet together, even for merriment and diversion. But the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public, or in some contrivance to raise prices. Smith is saying business owners naturally conspire against consumers. They collude to raise prices. They're not driven by competition toward public good. They're driven by self-interest toward monopoly. This is the opposite of what free market fundamentalists claim he believed. But it gets even more interesting when you look at where else Smith uses invisible hand. Smith uses invisible hand 2 other times in his writings, and neither supports the modern interpretation. The first use is in The Theory of Moral Sentiments, published 1759, 17 years before Wealth of Nations. Here's the context. Smith is talking about wealthy landowners who consume only slightly more than the poor, despite owning vastly more. He writes, the rich only select from the heap what is most precious and agreeable. They consume little more than the poor, and in spite of their natural selfishness and rapacity, they divide with the poor the produce of all their improvements. They are led by an invisible hand to make nearly the same distribution of the necessaries of life, which would have been made had the earth been divided into equal portions. Wait, what? Smith is saying the invisible hand leads to equal distribution of necessities. That rich and poor end up with similar amounts of life's necessities. This is the exact opposite of how the phrase is used today. Modern usage implies the invisible hand maximizes efficiency and wealth creation. Smith is describing wealth redistribution, and he's not even saying it's real. He's describing an idealized scenario. Notice the phrase, in spite of their natural selfishness and rapacity. Smith is acknowledging that the rich are selfish and greedy. He's imagining a world where that doesn't matter, because resources somehow get distributed anyway. This is aspirational, not descriptive. The third use of invisible hand is in Smith's essay, History of Astronomy, written in his youth and published posthumously. Here, Smith talks about ancient peoples believing that the invisible hand of Jupiter controlled thunder and lightning. He's using invisible hand to describe superstition. Primitive people attributing natural phenomena to divine intervention. Think about the irony. Smith uses invisible hand to mock superstitious belief in invisible forces controlling nature. And now we use it as if markets are controlled by an actual invisible force. We've turned Smith's metaphor for superstition into an economic superstition. So if Smith didn't believe in the modern version of the invisible hand, what did he believe? His actual economic theory is far more nuanced and radical than the version we've been taught. Here's what Smith actually believed. Markets are good at creating wealth, but terrible at distributing it fairly. He saw capitalism as incredibly productive, but morally dangerous. It creates prosperity, but also creates exploitation, inequality, and corruption. Smith's solution: heavy moral and regulatory frameworks to constrain capitalism's worst tendencies. Let me show you Smith's actual policy positions. On labor, Smith believed workers deserve high wages. He writes, servants, laborers, and workmen of different kinds make up the far greater part of every great political society. But what improves the circumstances of the greater part can never be regarded as an inconvenience to the whole. No society can surely be flourishing and happy, of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable. He's advocating for labor rights, for worker prosperity, for reducing inequality. On monopolies, Smith hated monopolies. He saw them as the greatest threat to functioning markets. He advocated aggressive government action to break them up and prevent their formation. He writes, the monopolists, by keeping the market constantly understocked, by never fully supplying the effectual demand, sell their commodities much above the natural price. Smith wanted government to intervene constantly to maintain competition. On corporations, Smith distrusted corporations intensely. He saw them as fundamentally corrupt. He writes, the directors of such companies, however, being the managers rather of other people's money than of their own, it cannot well be expected that they should watch over it with the same anxious vigilance with which the partners in a private copartnery frequently watch over their own. This is a critique of modern corporate structure. Smith is saying managers won't care about shareholders because it's not their money. On taxation, Smith advocated progressive taxation. The rich should pay higher rates. He writes, the subjects of every state ought to contribute towards the support of the government as nearly as possible, in proportion to their respective abilities. That is, in proportion to the revenue which they respectively enjoy under the protection of the state. He's calling for ability to pay taxation. The wealthy should pay more. On regulation, Smith supported extensive regulation of banking, joint stock companies, and any industry affecting public welfare. He compares banking regulation to fire safety regulations. Such regulations may, no doubt, be considered as, in some respects, a violation of natural liberty. But those exertions of the natural liberty of a few individuals, which might endanger the security of the whole society, are, and ought to be, restrained by the laws of all governments. He's saying, yes, regulation limits freedom, but public safety matters more than individual liberty. This is not libertarianism. This is regulated capitalism, with strong safety nets and progressive taxation. So how did Smith get turned into a free market fundamentalist? How did invisible hand become the rallying cry for deregulation? The answer is deliberate distortion. And it happened in the 20th century, 1940s, America, the rise of corporate capitalism. And corporations need an intellectual framework to justify their power. They find it in Adam Smith. Or rather, they create it from Adam Smith. Free market think tanks start quoting Smith selectively. They pull the invisible hand quote out of context. They ignore everything else he wrote. They create a simplified mythology. Smith equals free markets equals good. This process accelerates in the 1970s and 80s with the rise of neoliberalism. Reagan and Thatcher constantly invoke Adam Smith to justify deregulation, tax cuts for the rich, and weakening labor unions. But they're not quoting the real Adam Smith. They're quoting a fictional version created by pro-business intellectuals. Milton Friedman is particularly guilty of this. He popularizes the phrase invisible hand and uses it to argue for minimal government. He writes as if Smith's entire theory can be summarized as free markets work. But when you actually read Smith, you find a thinker concerned with moral philosophy, social welfare, and the dangers of unchecked capitalism. Smith's first book wasn't about economics. It was a theory of moral sentiments, about ethics and human psychology. He believed economics must be grounded in moral philosophy. He writes, "How selfish soever man may be supposed, there are evidently some principles in his nature which interest him in the fortune of others, and render their happiness necessary to him, though he derives nothing from it except the pleasure of seeing it." Smith believed humans are fundamentally social and moral creatures, not pure rational profit maximizers. His economic theory was built on this foundation. Markets work when people have moral constraints, when social norms prevent exploitation, when empathy balances self-interest. Remove those moral constraints, markets become destructive. But modern economics removed the moral foundation and kept only the market mechanism. They took Smith's nuanced theory and turned it into greed is good, and they justified this distortion by pointing to one phrase, invisible hand, a phrase Smith barely used, a phrase describing a minor phenomenon, a phrase taken completely out of context. This isn't just misinterpretation. This is intellectual fraud. They created fake Smith, a version that serves corporate interests, a version that justifies inequality as natural, a version that treats regulation as evil. Real Smith would be horrified. But here's what's even more disturbing. This fake version became the foundation of modern economic policy worldwide. Pull up income inequality statistics. Look at the charts since 1980, when neoliberalism took over, when Reagan and Thatcher implemented Smithian policies, when deregulation and tax cuts for the rich became orthodoxy. What happened? Inequality exploded. Worker wages stagnated. Corporate profits soared. The rich got exponentially richer while everyone else struggled. This is the exact opposite of what Smith predicted the invisible hand would do. Remember, Smith said the invisible hand would lead to nearly the same distribution of the necessaries of life, equal outcomes. Instead, we got the most unequal outcomes in a century. Why? Because the policies justified by invisible hand mythology aren't actually Smithian. They're anti-Smith wanted to break up monopolies. We've created tech monopolies that control entire sectors. Smith wanted progressive taxation. We've cut taxes for the wealthy and shifted burden to workers. Smith wanted labor protections. We've weakened unions and worker rights. Smith wanted regulation to prevent exploitation. We've deregulated and called it freedom. Every major policy of the past 40 years contradicts what Smith actually advocated. But they're all justified using Smith's name and the invisible hand metaphor. This is what happens when you reduce complex thinkers to sound bites. When you cherry-pick quotes to serve agendas. When you create mythology instead of reading actual texts. And the consequences are real. Millions of people have suffered from policies justified by a misunderstanding of Adam Smith. Workers told that unions are bad because Smith believed in free markets. He didn't say that. People told that regulations hurt the economy because Smith believed in invisible hands. He advocated extensive regulation. Citizens told that inequality is natural because Smith said self-interest creates optimal outcomes. He said no such thing. We're living in a world shaped by fake Smith, and it's not working. Real Smith had answers to our current problems. He worried about monopolies, about inequality, about the tendency of markets to concentrate wealth, about the need for moral constraints on capitalism. All of these concerns are more relevant than ever. But we can't hear them, because we're too busy listening to fake Smith. The invisible hand has become an invisible cage. A thought-terminating cliché that prevents real economic thinking. Someone proposes regulation. That interferes with the invisible hand. Someone questions inequality. The invisible hand distributes resources efficiently. Someone criticizes corporations. Trust the invisible hand. It's become economic religion. And like all religions, it requires faith rather than evidence. So here's the truth about Adam Smith's invisible hand. It barely existed in his work. And it doesn't mean what you think it means. Smith used the phrase 3 times. Once to describe merchants accidentally benefiting their country. Once to imagine equal distribution of necessities. Once to mock superstition. None of these support modern free market fundamentalism. The real Adam Smith was a moral philosopher concerned with human welfare. He saw markets as useful tools that needed extensive regulation and moral grounding. He worried about monopolies, inequality, and exploitation. He advocated progressive taxation, labor rights, and public investment. He would look at modern capitalism and see many of his worst fears realized. Monopolies dominating entire industries, extreme inequality, workers without bargaining power, markets without moral constraints. And he'd be furious that his name is used to justify all of it. The invisible hand mythology serves a purpose. It provides intellectual cover for policies that benefit the wealthy. It makes exploitation seem natural. It treats inequality as inevitable. But it's a lie built on misquoted fragments of a thinker who believed the opposite. But as a nuanced thinker, who understood both the power and the danger of markets, he knew capitalism creates wealth. He also knew it creates problems that only collective action can solve. He believed in markets. He also believed in regulation, taxation, and moral limits on profit-seeking. That's the real invisible hand, not a magical force that makes everything work, but the collective moral constraints that prevent markets from destroying society. What do you think? Have we been lied to about Adam Smith? Should we reclaim his actual ideas? Drop your thoughts in comments, because 250 years ago, Adam Smith wrote a nuanced theory of how markets could serve human flourishing, and we turned it into a slogan for greed. We took a moral philosopher and made him a mascot for immorality. We took a thinker who warned about the dangers of unconstrained capitalism and used his name to remove all constraints. The invisible hand isn't real, but the invisible cage it's built is. And maybe it's time to read what Adam Smith actually wrote, instead of what we've been told he said. And we deserve better than economic policies built on misunderstood metaphors. The invisible hand is a myth, but the visible hand of bad policy justified by that myth, that's very real, and it's crushing millions of people while a few profit enormously. Adam Smith would call it exactly what it is, a conspiracy against the public. His words, not ours. Maybe we should listen.